Deep in the cold, dark water, 2.5 miles below where the sun can reach, there sits a ship that everyone knows. The Titanic. For over 100 years she's been down there, quiet and still, while the world above kept spinning. We've seen her grand staircase in movies. We've read about her fancy dining rooms in books. We know about the rich people who sailed on her, and we know about the iceberg that ended everything. But there's a place on that ship that nobody talks about. A small room, a private space, a bathroom tucked away in first class. And inside that forgotten room, something waited in the darkness. Something that might change everything you thought you knew about that terrible night. Most people think treasure means gold or diamonds or fancy jewelry locked in a safe. But what if the real treasure isn't something you can hold in your hand? What if it's something quieter? Something that shows us who we really are when everything else falls apart? A robot is going down there right now. Not to bring back riches, not to disturb the dead, but to look, to see, to witness what's been hidden for more than a century in a place where only the ocean has been watching. And what it might find could make you cry. Back in 1912, when the Titanic was the most beautiful ship anyone had ever seen, the bathrooms in first class weren't just places to wash your hands. They were special, really special. The floors were heated so your feet wouldn't get cold. The sinks were made of the finest porcelain from England. The mirrors had frames that shined like silver. Even the soap dishes were elegant. Only the wealthiest people in the world got to use these rooms. While most passengers down in third class shared just a couple of bathrooms between hundreds of people, the folks upstairs had private spaces that looked like they belonged in a palace. These weren't just bathrooms. They were symbols. They said, "You made it. You're somebody important." But on the night of April 14th, when the ship hit that iceberg and started sinking into water so cold it could kill you in minutes, all that fancy stuff stopped mattering. The heated floors couldn't save anyone. The pretty mirrors couldn't show you a way out. Suddenly, a bathroom was just a room. 4 walls, a door you could close, a place to hide when the world outside became too terrifying to face. And maybe, just maybe, it became something else too. A place to say goodbye. The robot moves through the water like a small submarine, its bright lights cutting through the black. Down here there is no color. Everything is gray and brown and covered in rust that looks like frozen tears running down the walls. The hallways that once sparkled with electric lights and echoed with laughter now sit silent, empty, haunted by memories that nobody alive can remember. The robot's camera sweeps slowly across the corridor. Here's where someone walked, hurrying to dinner, excited about the lobster they were about to eat. There's where a child probably ran, giggling, while her mother called after her to slow down and act like a lady. These halls held conversations about business deals and marriage proposals and plans for what people would do when they reached New York. So many plans. So many tomorrows that never came. The robot pauses. Up ahead, a door hangs at an angle, half open, like it's been waiting all this time for someone to come back. Slowly, carefully, the robot moves closer. The door is white, or it used to be. Now it's covered in something that looks like icicles but isn't ice. It's rust and minerals and tiny creatures that have been growing here in the deep for longer than any of us have been alive. The robot's mechanical arm reaches out and gently pushes. The door moves just a little bit more, creaking in the silence that has no sound. And then the robot goes inside. The bathroom is small. Much smaller than you'd think for such a fancy ship. There's a sink, a toilet, a little shelf on the wall. Everything is tipped to one side because the whole ship is leaning, slowly being swallowed by the ocean floor. But even though everything is covered in rust and decay, you can still tell this was once beautiful. The sink has delicate curves. The mirror frame has little flowers carved into it. Someone designed this room with love, wanting it to be perfect. But it's not the fancy details that make the robot stop and focus its camera. It's the objects. On the floor, near the wall, there's a hairbrush. The bristles are gone, probably eaten away by time and sea creatures, but the handle is still there, resting exactly where someone set it down. Next to it, a small bottle. The label is long gone, but the shape tells you it held perfume. Something that smelled like roses, maybe, or lavender. Something that made someone feel pretty. And then there are the shoes. 2 of them. Small ones. Women's shoes. placed neatly side by side, like someone took them off and lined them up the way your mom tells you to do before bed. But why would someone take off their shoes in a bathroom while the ship was sinking? The robot's light moves across the room, and that's when it sees something else. Something on the edge of the sink, carefully placed on the porcelain. 2 handkerchiefs. Cloth squares that ladies used back then instead of tissues. They're folded. Not crumpled up or thrown down in a hurry. Folded. With care. Like someone took the time, even when time was the one thing they didn't have. One of the handkerchiefs has something attached to it. A button. Sewn on by hand with thread that you can still see, even after all these years underwater. It's not fancy thread. Just regular thread. Probably pulled from someone's sewing kit. But someone sat there and stitched that button onto that handkerchief. Why would anyone do that? And then the robot sees it. The thing that makes this whole room different from every other room that's been explored on this ship. Tucked under one of the folded handkerchiefs, barely visible, there's a piece of paper. A note. The writing is smudged and faded, and the ocean has nearly erased it completely. But you can still see that someone wrote something. Words. A message. Put there deliberately. Hidden, but not thrown away. We'll never know what those words said. The robot can't read them. Scientists who study the images later won't be able to make them out. The ocean has kept that secret. But the note itself tells a story, even without words. Because you don't write a note unless you have something important to say. You don't hide it carefully unless you hope someone might find it. You don't fold handkerchiefs and sew on buttons and arrange things gently unless you're doing it for someone you love. And suddenly, this isn't just a bathroom anymore. This is a place where someone spent their last moments on Earth thinking about somebody else. Think about that for a second. The ship is tilting. You can hear the screaming from outside. You know the lifeboats are gone or going. You know you're probably not going to make it. The water is rising, and it's so cold it hurts to even think about. You have maybe 10 minutes, maybe 5, maybe less. What would you do? Would you run? Would you cry? Would you pray? Or would you find a quiet place, close the door, and do something kind? Would you wet a handkerchief so someone could wipe their face? Would you sew a button back on so their coat would stay closed and keep them just a tiny bit warmer? Would you take off your shoes so someone else could wear them, someone whose feet were bare and freezing? Would you write a note, even knowing no one might ever read it just because you needed to say something true before everything ended? That's what happened in this room. We don't know who. We don't know their names. History didn't write them down. There were no cameras in that bathroom, no witnesses who lived to tell the story. But the evidence is there, arranged carefully on a sink 2.5 miles below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. Someone loved someone, and in the middle of the worst night imaginable, they chose to show it. Not with grand gestures, not with heroic speeches, just with small acts of tenderness. A folded handkerchief, a sewn button, a pair of shoes placed side by side. The whole world remembers the Titanic for a lot of reasons. We remember the wealthy businessmen who went down with the ship standing on the deck in their finest suits. We remember the band that kept playing music even as the water rose. We remember the captain who stayed at his post. We remember the stories of bravery and cowardice, of lifeboats that left half empty while people screamed for help in the freezing water. Those are important stories. They deserve to be told. But maybe the most important stories aren't the ones everyone knows. Maybe the ones that matter most are the quiet ones, the private ones, the moments that happened when nobody was watching, the bathroom where someone cared for someone else, the handkerchief folded with shaking hands, the button sewn on in darkness, the note written in hope or despair or love or all three at once. We build monuments to great people. We put up statues and name buildings after them. We write their names in history books so everyone will remember what they did. And that's good. That's important. But what about the person who never got their name in a book? What about the mother who gave her coat to her daughter? The stranger who helped another stranger into a lifeboat? The husband who stayed behind so his wife could go? The friend who sat with another friend so they wouldn't die alone? What about the person in that bathroom who took precious time to make things just a little bit better for someone else? There's no statue for them, no monument, no name carved in stone. Just a handkerchief, a button, a pair of shoes, and a robot's camera, witnessing it all 112 years too late. Some people might say it doesn't matter. They're gone. Everyone from that ship is gone now. The last survivor died years ago. There's no one left to thank. No one left to honor. Why does this little bathroom matter when we already know how the story ends? But here's the thing. Here's what makes this discovery so powerful, so heartbreaking, so beautiful. It matters because it reminds us of something we forget sometimes, something we need to remember, especially now, especially in a world that can feel cold and scary and too big to understand. It reminds us that kindness doesn't need an audience. Love doesn't need witnesses. Doing something good for another person is worth it even if no one ever knows, even if no one ever thanks you, even if the thing you do is small and simple and won't change the world. Because to the person you do it for, it might mean everything. That handkerchief might have cooled a fever for just a few minutes. That button might have kept a coat closed against the freezing air. Those shoes might have protected someone's feet from the icy deck. The note might have carried words of comfort or hope, or simply, "I love you." We'll never know the details. But we know it happened. And knowing it happened changes something inside us. It makes the Titanic more than just a disaster, more than just a tragedy, more than just a cautionary tale about human arrogance and hubris. It makes it a story about us, about who we are when everything goes wrong, about the choices we make when we know the ending won't be happy. And some of us, even at the very end, choose love. The robot finishes its scan of the bathroom. Its mission here is complete. Soon it will move on to other parts of the ship, documenting, recording, preserving what it can before the ocean claims it all forever. Because the Titanic is dying. Not quickly, like it did that terrible night in 1912, but slowly. Rust is eating away at the metal. Bacteria are consuming the wood. Every year that passes, more of the ship crumbles and falls apart. Scientists say that within a few decades, maybe sooner, there won't be much left. The grand staircase will collapse. The hull will disintegrate. The ship will become just a pile of rust and debris on the ocean floor. And when that happens, this bathroom will disappear too. The handkerchiefs will dissolve into nothing. The button will fall away. The shoes will finally crumble. The note, already barely visible, will vanish completely. All evidence of that last act of love will be gone. But we know about it now. Because of this robot. Because of this exploration. Because someone thought to look in a place that wasn't glamorous or famous or important by anyone's usual standards. And now that we know, we can't unknow it. We can't forget it. This story becomes part of the Titanic's legacy, part of our collective memory, part of what we pass on to our children and grandchildren when we tell them about that ship and that night and all the people who were there. We can tell them about the millionaires and the captain and the band. Yes, tell those stories. They matter. But also tell them about the bathroom. Tell them about the handkerchief and the button and the shoes. Tell them about the person whose name we don't know but whose heart we can see clearly, even through 100 years of darkness and salt water. Tell them that even when the world is ending, even when there's no hope left, even when no one is watching and no one will ever know, some people still choose to be kind, still choose to care, still choose to love. That's the treasure the robot found. Not gold, not jewels, not riches that could make someone wealthy, but something far more valuable. Proof, evidence, testimony to the fact that humans, at our core, at our very best, are capable of extraordinary tenderness. The ship is gone. The people are gone. The night that changed everything is now just a date in history books. But in a small bathroom, in a forgotten corner of a broken ship, the truth remains. Love was there. Kindness was there. Humanity was there. And now, thanks to a robot with a camera, we know. We see. We witness. We remember not just how they died, but how they lived, how they loved, how they cared for each other, right up until the very end. The ocean couldn't erase that. Time couldn't destroy it. Rust and decay and a century of darkness couldn't make it disappear. Because some things are stronger than steel. Some things survive even when everything else is lost. A folded handkerchief, a sewn button, a pair of shoes placed carefully on a bathroom floor. These are not nothing. These are everything. These are the fingerprints of love, pressed into history, waiting patiently for someone to finally see them and understand. The robot rises slowly from the bathroom, its lights growing dimmer as it moves back into the hallway. Behind it, the little room returns to darkness. But it's not the same darkness as before, because now it holds something it didn't have a moment ago. It holds our attention, our awareness, our hearts. We looked into that room and it looked back at us. It showed us something true, something that makes the Titanic more than a museum piece or a movie or a tragic story from long ago. It makes it a mirror, and in that mirror, we see ourselves. We see what we could be, what we should be, what we are at our very best when everything else is stripped away and all that's left is the choice to be cruel or kind, selfish or selfless, cold or loving. And someone in that bathroom chose love, chose kindness, chose to spend their final moments making things just a tiny bit better for another human being. Not for glory, not for recognition, not for reward, just because it was the right thing to do, just because someone needed help, just because love, even at the end, especially at the end, is what matters most. That's the story of the bathroom. That's the treasure in the darkness. That's what the robot found and brought back to us from the deep. Not riches, not gold, not anything you can spend or sell or put in a museum behind glass, but something infinitely more precious, a reminder, a truth, a light in the darkness that says, even here, even now, even when hope is gone and death is certain, love remains. Kindness endures, humanity survives, and that, more than anything else salvaged from that ship, is worth remembering, worth protecting, worth passing on to everyone who comes after us, because someday, each of us will face our own ending. Maybe not as dramatic as the Titanic, maybe not as sudden or terrifying, but the moment will come when we have to choose who we'll be when it matters most, when the world is watching or when it isn't, when we'll be rewarded or when we won't, when it's easy or when it's the hardest thing we've ever done. And in that moment, we might remember a bathroom at the bottom of the ocean, a handkerchief folded with care, a button sewn with love, a pair of shoes placed side by side. And we might think, even here, even now, I can be kind, I can be good, I can choose love. That's the gift the robot brought back from the deep. That's the treasure that was hidden all this time, not metal or stone or anything that glitters, but truth. Pure, beautiful, heartbreaking truth about who we are and who we can be. The Titanic took 1,500 people down with it that night. We know their names now. We've counted them. We've told their stories. But in a small bathroom, in a quiet moment, someone did something so simple and so profound that it echoes across time. And now, over a century later, we finally get to witness it. We finally get to say thank you. We finally get to understand that the real story of the Titanic isn't just about how it sank. It's about how, even as it was sinking, love didn't.